Welcome back to another video, everybody. We have a really special guest today, Andrei Polyakov. He is the CEO and co-founder of a cryptocurrency platform similar to Coinbase. It's called Coinberry, but it's for Canadian residents. In this episode, we're going to talk about his thesis on Bitcoin, what he thinks about the future of crypto and regulation. Really awesome guest today. So listen carefully. And I also want to mention to you guys that I'm starting to publish a lot more on my newsletter. So click the link in the description to sign up for the newsletter. We're doing a giveaway. We're going to be giving away different merchandise, t-shirts, and even some free crypto. So let's talk to our next guest. Welcome back, everybody, to the Crypto Founders Report. Today, our guest is Andrei Poliakov. He is the co-founder and CEO of the first fully approved pure-play Canadian crypto platform, Coinberry, which offers the ability to buy and sell digital assets like Cardano, Ethereum, Bitcoin, and other popular cryptocurrencies to Canadian residents using Canadian dollars. And I'm very pleased to have Andre on the show today to tell us his perspective on the impending regulation on the asset class of crypto, as well as his thoughts on the future outlook of Bitcoin. Welcome, Andre.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So this show is about founders. It's about the people who are building the infrastructure of the crypto financial system, blockchain. So my first question is going to be pertaining to sort of your journey so far in this space. How did you get started with building Coinberry?
So yeah, it's a really fun story actually. So I had heard about Bitcoin back probably 6 years ago, back when it was still rather on the ground at different venues. And I always and I found initially the concept very fascinating, but I didn't really click with it back then. And then fast forward to late, I think it was early 2017. I was actually on a bachelor trip down in Miami, and we had some friends there that were American friends, and some that came from from Canada. And on the very last day of that trip, we had to settle all our debts, and so we were sitting on the beach in Miami, and believe it or not, it's actually very difficult unless you have cash to send money from Canada to the US, other than sending a wire or again, going to an ATM to get cash. But we were on the beach, nobody wanted to go to the ATM. And so my business partner and co-founder, Evan, back then, he had this idea, and he said, hey guys, why don't we all just settle our debts using Bitcoin? And so we all got our Coinbase accounts, and it was on the beach there, setting it up, buying Bitcoin, and then sending the coin to each other to settle the debts. Which in hindsight probably whatever it is I send is probably worth tenfold right now. I wish I had settled it. And
That's the curse of crypto. Like no matter what you do, you're always going to feel pain in the future for doing it.
Exactly. But I had this aha moment there because I was previously involved in a business that we were shipping goods internationally, and when you ship goods internationally, there's a lot of custom clearance that has to take place. And if you ever have a container stuck at customs waiting to be cleared, and you have to pay duties, and you're trying to send a wire, and it's a long weekend, and it's not arriving for 4 days, 5 days, and you're paying for holding costs, those add up very much. And so at that moment, I had this aha moment where I thought to myself, wow, there's this very simple use case that five guys just found for this phenomenal new technology, and blockchain and its application to the financial instruments. And I can only imagine what would happen, or what is going to happen, when sort of big business, when international shipment companies, when international trade starts to really utilize the same sort of application of blockchain, be it Bitcoin or something else. And so that kind of sat with me for a couple of months. And I thought to myself, like, there is something here that is going to fundamentally change the way that we do business, the way that we actually interact as a society financially with each other. At the time, I had a corporate job, and I went back to my corporate job after my trip. And fast forward a few months, and Evan calls me up and says, "Hey, look, there's a lot that's happening in the crypto space in Toronto." And there was Toronto was just a bustling hub at that point in time of energy and meetup groups, and you had little pockets of group would get together. and talk about all things crypto. And so fortunately enough, Evan's condo was one of those places. At any point in time, you could come in there and you'd have 20 people just setting up trading tables, monitors and just trading and doing ARB. And you had people, talking about business opportunities. Like it was a very almost bohemian-like atmosphere, and everybody was super excited. The electricity was in the air, and that's where the idea of Coinberry was born. We had sat down and we said, hey, look, there's people want to buy Bitcoin, but they want to do so, safely, securely, and conveniently. And back then, buying Bitcoin in Canada, at least, safely and securely was not an option. You'd have to either meet somebody at a coffee shop, or you'd have to, wait for weeks on end to get approved to join a platform.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw an opportunity there to really, build a platform which is focused on not only safety and security, but convenience as well, and to do so in a very compliant and sort of sustainable manner. And so that's how the whole thesis of Coinberry was born. So I can keep telling you the Coinberry story, but if you have any other questions, let me know.
No, I mean, it's always interesting to hear the origins of something that got big, and especially in our space, right? Because our space is growing so quickly, and it's hard to comprehend like how it all just sprouted out. So it seems like basically overnight, but once you hear the stories about it, you start to understand that the process is a lot longer. It's just that we sort of started thinking about this way before anybody else has been thinking about it. We saw the opportunity where nobody else could see it. So I always find those stories to be really fascinating. So that's your story. So can you just tell us the process of sort of from where that sort of the origins of Coinberry to where is Coinberry today?
Yeah, so we are one of we are a true startup, a true bootstrap startup, where we started at, like I mentioned, in my co-founder's condo, put some cash together, and moved into a very, very dinky office downtown Toronto, where you kind of have to, when you're working late hours and you're walking down the street, you got to walk fast. Worked out of that office for a bit, and then got our first sort of angel money, investment, a couple $100,000. Ended up moving into a much nicer office, and sort of started building out the team. We had the foresight to take a very, like I said, sustainable approach as it pertains to sort of safety and security and compliance. So we were one of the first, we became back then one of the first crypto trading platforms in Canada to actually become registered with FinTrack, which is like the Canadian equivalent of FinCEN. And shortly thereafter, we applied for registration with the Ontario Securities Commission. So the way it works in Canada is each province and territory in Canada has their own securities commission. So unlike in the States where you have the SEC, which is a federal body, in Canada, each province has its own commission that regulates securities dealings within that province. So we're based in Toronto, in Toronto, Ontario. And so we approached the Ontario Securities Commission. Back then we said, hey, look, we have this novel business. We have, we believe that eventually you're going to end up regulating the space. So we'd like to sort of front run this and start applying and getting registered with you. So this was about 3 years ago. And so we went through the entire process with the Ontario Securities Commission. So, they visited our offices, they basically got comfortable with the business model, with the team, with the staff, and sort of with our vision and what we're trying to do. And ultimately what they did then is they brought us forth in front of all the commissions in Canada. So all the commissions in Canada come together into this body called the Canadian Securities Administrators, and they all sit on around the table, so to speak, and take decisions that any of the commissions bring to the table. So earlier this year, the Ontario Securities Commission brought us forth, and I presented to all the provinces, and then answered all of their questions for, over a period of several months afterwards to make sure that they were all comfortable, again, with the business model that we have, with all the safeguards, the insurances, the policies, the procedures that we put in place, for investor protection and the custody that we put in place to make sure that assets that we hold under management are, custodied properly and safely and securely. And ultimately, after all of that, about would say about 8 months after I presented to the CSA, we were finally, very happy to receive our exemptive relief and our registration in late August. And so becoming the first pure play crypto platform in Canada to actually become registered that allowed our users to fund and withdraw in both Canadian dollars and crypto on the platform. So it's a wonderful success story of a Canadian startup that really started from the bottom, and now we're here.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. And see, I spoke to Alex Mashinsky, the founder of Celsius, and he says the same thing. He says that it's a lot harder to build something that's more like a centralized service than it is DeFi. Like anybody can just go build a DeFi, right? But there's a lot of merit in building something that's both approved by the government and also accepted by the people that are using it, right? And people feel comfortable using that, and total safety and security. So there's definitely a place for products and services like Coinberry, and especially in places like Canada where the options are limited and the regulation standards I think are higher than here in the States. So there's a lot of merit in that, and I commend you for that. You remind me of Brian Armstrong a little bit. Has anybody ever told you that?
Is it because of the shaved head?
I mean, you're doing not just that, but the things you're doing, right? So, so my next question let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin, because today the price of Bitcoin is between $48,000 and $49,000. There's a lot of people. It's the 3rd of October, the 4th of October. A lot of people think that October is going to be a huge month. This is not financial advice for anyone who's listening. This is just our opinion. But what I want to know is, why is Bitcoin such a good investment right now, in your opinion?
So I think whether it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, or any of the other sort of main projects out there, I think fundamentally what we're seeing is the beginning of mass adoption. We saw a lot of institutional interest this year, which drove up the price of all crypto, but Bitcoin specifically at the beginning of the year. And as you have the maturing of the industry take place, and ultimately platforms such as ours that are becoming sort of regulated and registered, is an indication of how the industry is maturing. And so as the industry matures, you're going to have more and more institutional interest in acquiring Bitcoin, because a lot of institutional players, they have mandates that forbid them from exposure to any sort of assets that aren't regulated by the regulatory bodies. So there's a lot of institutional investors that are willing and are looking to invest money in Bitcoin, but they simply don't have the venues to do so. And so whether it's us or other platforms that will become registered soon, the more mature the industry becomes, the more the regulators provide a place for institutional investors to actually participate in the space, the more demand you're going to have from institutions, right? And that's obviously going to, when you have increased demand and you have decreased supply with each forthcoming halving, you're obviously going to see, upward pressure on the price in the long run. And that's what that's my belief. Again, not giving anybody any financial advice. This is my personal belief in where the price is going to go. But I think it's a reasonable assumption to take, seeing as how we have platforms, such as Coinberry that are focused on sort of safety and security, and giving institutional investors a place to actually start, having exposure to Bitcoin and actually holding the underlying asset itself.
So you believe that the demand of institutional investors is the main driving cause of the future of Bitcoin, or the potential of Bitcoin in moving forward?
Well, I mean, I think as the technology in general and as the sort of the concept itself matures, right, you're going to see varying parties come into play, right? I mean, 3 years ago, you had a lot of retail investors, but very, very, risky, people that are very open to taking risks, invest in Bitcoin. That had that run up. Then you had a bit of a pullback. Now you have sort of more of the institutional investors that came in. And ultimately, we're still far, far away from true mass adoption.
Yeah.
But when you see what's happening in El Salvador, which became the first country to actually start utilizing Bitcoin as legal tender, there's talks of Brazil doing something similar. There's talks of Ukraine doing something similar. So there's more and more countries that are looking at this. And if you look back, 10 years ago, people would say, Bitcoin, anybody accepting Bitcoin, from like on a corporate level for purchases of goods at a store is nonsense. And then corporations started doing that, right? And then back then, you think back 3 years, would you have ever assumed that any country would start actually utilizing, Bitcoin as legal tender in 2021? No, you wouldn't have. But here we are. Like back in 2019, I think Coinberry became the first platform to actually partner with a municipality in Canada to allow them to accept Bitcoin as a form of payment for municipal taxes. It's a partnership that we had signed with the town of Innisfil, which is still in place. So, we had the foresight, but, Canada is a much smaller country, obviously, population and economy-wise than the States. But, we try to push the industry forward as much as we can here. And ultimately, we see how the adoption curve is taking place. But I think it's still fair to say that on a sort of mass adoption scale, there's still a lot of room for growth. So ultimately, the more mass adoption, the more demand. And then again, whether it's institutional or retail mass adoption, we're going to have more demand in the future.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you on that. And, with all the recent things that have been happening with the Lightning Network being adopted onto Twitter, with El Salvador, like as you mentioned, if you go to McDonald's or Starbucks there, they have it all hooked up to their retail systems where you can just pay with Bitcoin. I still find it a little bit difficult to understand or feel comfortable giving Bitcoin for products and services when I know that the price of Bitcoin is still appreciating. So I think that's my biggest sort of, objection to using Bitcoin to pay for things, products and services. Maybe there's something you can add to this conversation about how we use crypto to buy and sell things. So there are a lot of nations talking about central bank digital currencies, but right now we don't have any any of that available right now. So there's stable coins, right? There's the USDT stablecoin, which I'm aware that in Canada is kind of barred, right?
Yeah, so part of the decision that was put forth by the Ontario Securities Commission as it pertains to Coinbase specifically is that we're not allowed to list Tether. I know that's a position that is being taken across a number of commissions in Canada and across a number of provinces. And look, I'm not a representative of any of them, so I don't want to talk to what their decision-making process was. My understanding of it is that there's there's some questions as to whether Tether is truly backed one-to-one. There was problems or concerns about the audit process Tether went through. There's concerns about the commercial paper that's underlying the underlying asset right now on Tether. With the Evergrande fiasco that happened, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. Tether had to go out and say that no, we don't hold any Evergrande paper. But the fact that they even have to come out and say that is already telling in itself that the community and the industry has got its concerns. So whereas we didn't list Tether before, nor were we planning to, the position that the commission took wasn't surprising.
I agree with that decision. But there are different kinds of stablecoins for those who do want to use stablecoins for trading. There's something called like an algorithmic stablecoin, and then there's also gold-backed stablecoins and things like that. Do you have any comments about those? Like, what are the differences between, like, for example, an algorithmic stablecoin and something like a Tether?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, something like a Tether, allegedly, right, is backed one-to-one with actual US dollars that are supposed to be parked in a bank account somewhere. I don't recall where right now, but there's a claim that they're parked in a bank account. Ultimately, then that got changed to, again, it's not just US dollars, there's also commercial paper that's backing it. which has a just opens a can of worms of questions in on itself as well as to how that's being valued to actually get to parity with the US dollar as it pertains to the coin itself.
Yeah.
But anyway, fundamentally, if we strip away the complexities of Tether, fundamentally, there's supposed to be, for every Tether coin that's out there, it's supposed to be $1 in a US bank account, which is a little bit different from an algorithmic stable coin, which actually algorithmically, burns or creates enough coin to create the parity synthetically, right? And so personally, I think once we get the technology to a point where algorithmic stable coins actually function as they should under diverse conditions, because when you have a lot of price movement in the markets, you do see algorithmic coins. You also see the same thing with stablecoin, like with actual asset-backed stablecoins, like the gold coin you mentioned or Tether. You see them fluctuate as well with very volatile price conditions, but you see that with algorithmic coins a lot more, I noticed. And that speaks to me, on the one hand, as to the sort of the imperfection of the algorithm to date, because if it's unable to stabilize under adverse market conditions, then obviously there's questions as to the utility of the stable coin. If you can only use it when markets are flat, you really use it as a stable coin when markets are volatile. Can you really use it as a stable coin? Right? But that being said, look, the whole industry, right, is growing. And I just talked about the maturing of sort of the compliance regimes and how they address crypto regulations in different countries, in Canada specifically. Again, we're growing as an industry. You got to think back. The industry hasn't been around for very long. We're talking about 10, 11 years at this point in time. That's nothing. The fact that we got this far, that countries are already adopting, blockchain, the application of blockchain as a financial, as a technology to financial instruments is phenomenal in on itself. And I think we should be ecstatic about the fact that that's taking place. And I personally can't wait for the time, and the day where when we start utilizing crypto as a means of just all financial transactions that we make as a society. That's why we're passionate about what we're doing with Coinberry and working with regulators and working with the municipalities and pushing forth, sort of the industry as much as we can in Canada. But that's going to take a little bit of time still, right? I mean, the technology is still maturing. We're talking about, we're still waiting for ETH 2.0, talk about, programmatic Bitcoin. Like there's still, the technology in on itself is still maturing and probably will continue to do so indefinitely, to be completely honest with you. But it's a phenomenally exciting time right now for the industry. Yeah. I'm super happy to have an opportunity to share my point of view about it as well.
Yeah, I'm very glad to be a part of it as well. So in terms of like legislation and regulation, I heard you in another interview saying that there's potentially multiple different realities that could exist, or multiple different modes of regulation that could exist, and maybe even different financial systems that could exist. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so what I was talking about is I was saying that you could have central bank stable coins. And look, fundamentally, I don't think anybody's arguing as to the fact that blockchain as a technology and its application to financial markets and financial instruments is life-changing, right? To our society, right? What I think what I think we may end up seeing is a reality where you have central banks release stable coins that are backed by the central bank. There's no way to really stop the utility or the usage of Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency efficiently. Like you can't stop people from using Bitcoin.
True.
Or holding Bitcoin. So I think what we'll end up seeing is sort of a dual reality where you will have the sort of digitalization of national currencies and perhaps even their migration towards centralized blockchains. But then you'll also have truly decentralized projects and blockchains like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, that will exist in parallel. So that's what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting. I sort of have a lot of different hypotheses myself, and when I heard you say that, it just sounded right to me that there can't just be one end all system. There's probably going to be multiple different sort of levels or different realities that we all sort of different financial systems that we all are part of or are part of multiple different systems. But it's definitely a pleasure to have you on the show. You've been extremely insightful to sort of my thesis on Bitcoin. Do you have anything that you want to add about? Do you have like an altcoin thesis? Maybe do you believe that one ecosystem or versus another will outperform another, or do you want to stay neutral on those?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of phenomenal projects out there. I don't want to start pumping any one coin. There's a lot of phenomenal projects, and a lot of what's happening out there right now that's trying to fix the inefficiencies of what Ethereum, what Bitcoin, the two main obviously
Yeah.
blockchains that they have. So I'm very excited about some of those that are going to be rolling out soon. I'm super excited about E 2.0, and ultimately we'll see what the future brings. But all in all, I think the industry is in a phenomenally exciting point right now, and it's sort of a precipitous of mass adoption. And it's a great time to get into this space. If you are sort of listening to this show and thinking about buying a little bit of Bitcoin or Ethereum, you should most definitely do so, as long as you're doing so responsibly, and on a safe and secure platform. And if you're in Canada, then of course we invite you to use Coinberry at coinberry.com.
Yep, I'll be putting a link in the description for any Canadian residents who are looking for a safe exchange to use. I would highly recommend check out Coinberry. Everybody, this is Andrei Poliakov. Thank you so much, Andre, for coming on the show today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.